this coming fall will be my 4th year bow hunting. A lot of that time was spent hunting public land, whether that be conservation land, forest land, walk-in hunting. I actually got a couple properties that were permission properties that I had completely to myself. Today I'm going to tell you my personal takeaways between hunting private land and public land, and if one is actually harder or easier than the other. So this current piece of property that I got is just over 90 acres, and I actually didn't get this property until like the first week in November. Kind of coming in blind. I did figure out pretty quickly kind of where the deer are and stuff. The first thing I noticed about private is that I have one less thing to worry about when I'm out there hunting, and that's, you know, running into people. I was able to come out here on the days that I could hunt and know for a fact that besides the farmer, but he kind of stays out of my way, but I knew that when I came in here that nobody else was going to be in here unless they were not supposed to be in here. And that was a huge plus, because some of the things I run into on public land is I might find a good spot, especially like when I'm scouting in the summer, or, you know, we're walking around in the fall trying to find new places to go. We might find a really good spot, and at the time might not have a whole lot of hunter sign in there, where people have been walking in and out. We find the spot, we find good sign, get up into a tree, we hunt it, looks good, we keep coming back. But during that period of time, we have no idea if anybody else is walking in there. And at least the pieces of ground that I hunt close, they're not huge pieces of public, so you have a very high chance of somebody walking underneath you or you running into somebody while you're going out to hunt. So that was my biggest takeaway first with the private ground, is I can come in here and hunt wherever I want to hunt the wind, and I'm not having to worry about hunting with other people. While we're on the topic of hunting with other people, having private ground to hunt, especially if you're the only one who's hunting it, you can manage your deer population, whereas on public ground, you can manage yourself, but you don't know what everybody else is doing who is out there hunting. And that all kind of depends on how often you can come hunt or how many years you are going to have this property to hunt. If you've only got the property and you can only hunt it for 1 year, your management practices aren't going to be as long term as if you maybe had a lease or something that you knew you had like 5 years after that, where you could pass on certain deer, you could make adjustments to the vegetation and make their habitat better. Whereas if you just have it for 1 year, there's not very many things that you can actually do. Also on that note, I'm in Southwest Missouri. The public land, especially during rifle season, is absolutely hammered, and there are a lot of young deer that get killed during that time period. I'm a newer hunter, but I do have standards that I've set for myself. I have a certain age class deer that I'm shooting for, and I'm pretty much doing it with only archery equipment. Not saying you can't find those kind of bucks on public ground, but the younger ones are more likely to be killed compared to if you have your own property. You know, unless that buck crosses over, gets hit by a car, or maybe the neighbors hunt around it, that if you pass that deer, there's a good chance that that deer is going to be back on the property that you are hunting next year, as long as the stuff's over here and he has what he needs. Talking about having what they need, my 3rd or 4th or whatever number I'm on as far as takeaways for having private ground, if you lease or you own or you do have permission where the farmer or the landowner will allow you to make adjustments to the land, you can make a piece of property pretty damn good for deer hunting and or turkeys. For example, this farmer that I have permission to hunt on, he told me like I'm allowed to plant, you know, little food plots here and there. I can cut some brush down for like bedding. I could trim some trees down to where I can climb up the trees easier. He's allowing me to change things that I know, even though I'm not a biologist and I'm not very smart and I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I do a little bit. I can make adjustments that are going to keep deer over here longer, which will allow me to have the opportunity at the deer that I am shooting for. And not only for my sake and being able to get that mature buck that I'm looking for, but it's good for the deer. If you're making adjustments to make habitat better for yourself and hunting, you are also just in general making that habitat better for the animal. So having a piece of private ground where you can make changes, you can give them food, you can give them more bedding and make them feel safer on the property that you are hunting and that you are making adjustments to, all of that ends up being good whether you kill a deer or not. Now, getting into the cons of private land, I think the biggest one is it's not super easy to come by unless you are purchasing it or leasing it. And around me, finding a good lease that's worth the money that they're asking for is getting more difficult and more difficult. And because of the hunting boom over the last few years, landowners are not giving permission to people as much because they may have had a bad experience because of a hunter who did something stupid 2, 3, 5, I mean sometimes like 10, 15 years ago. They aren't letting anybody hunt. When I got this piece of permission, I had knocked on 16 doors that weekend, and I ended up getting 2 yeses. One of them is decent ground, but just the way the property is laid out, they're running a bunch of cattle through there. It's not great for deer. The deer are in there. It's not set up for them. Even if I were to go in and make changes, it's just not a good spot for them to be during the rut. They are in there a little bit in the late season, but they're kind of scarce. There's good properties around them, so they usually push out towards those other properties. But the whole point of that, like gaining access to private land to hunt, you might gain access to it, but then you can't make adjustments. Some farmers won't even let you, trim branches down so that you can climb trees, or maybe it's just so overgrown that it's not good for hunting because you can't see past maybe 5-10 yards in the spots where the deer are moving through. I was grateful enough where this farmer told me, like, hey, trim whatever you need to trim, do whatever you need to do, like just make it as easy on yourself as possible. And honestly, not every farmer is like that. From my experience, most of them don't even want you hunting, let alone if they do want you hunting and you convince them to let you hunt, they're not going to want you doing anything to their property except hunting on it. Now, looking at the other side, it's really windy and I hope this is not screwing with my audio. Now, looking at the other side of things, let's say you are leasing a piece of property. Me personally, I've not had experience hunting on a lease, but I'm going to use this piece of property that I'm on now, which is permission, and he is allowing me to make changes, whether that be with food, habitat, whatever. So I can pretty much do what I want as long as I get permission from him. But anyway, if you can make changes to the property and you can do this habitat improvement or giving them more food, whatever, that stuff costs a lot of money. Now, I'm not doing anything just massive on this piece of property, just a few little kill plots and one bigger plot just for them to have some food in the winter. That's still going to cost me hundreds of dollars, and that's me not having any equipment brought out here. That's strictly just for me doing the work, a lot of hard work, and buying the seed and whatever to make the vegetation better. Again, I am forming my opinion based where I'm at. I'm in southern Missouri. There's not a lot of crop around, so the more central and northern you get, or if you live in other Midwest states where there's a lot of crop around, there might not be as much work that you need to do because they've already got this crop planted and you are just hunting like the edges of the timber or hunting these fields or whatever. Not saying that's easy either, because you still have to gain that permission and them allow you to hunt on it. But down here, to have good crop around and making it a deer hunting property, you have to put in the work, and putting in that work also includes spending a lot of money. And if you ask my wife, it takes a lot of time and effort to spend that money to make the land better. Now, my kind of last downside to the private aspect of it, specifically talking about the permission aspect of it, and really kind of, if you're leasing a property too, but you never know when you're not going to have that property to hunt again. Do you put all of this money and all of this time into this property for a year and not know if you're going to have it next year? With the leases, some people have relationships with the landowner, so they know for a fact that they're going to have this property to hunt next year, but that doesn't mean that that landowner decides to sell. I've got a bunch of buddies who have had leases for years, 10 plus years, and this past year, the landowner decided they're going to sell and they're not going to be leasing anymore after they've put all this money into it to make it what it is now. So you very well could spend money, spend a lot of time, and then next year, even though they might have told you, yeah, come back next year and hunt, a phone call, anything, they could say, you can't come out here and hunt anymore, especially if you're just on like a piece of permission ground. Overall, I have had a really good experience this past fall. This is really my first permission property I've had. Me being able to hunt it and understand the deer better, not having to worry about other people, making notes on things that need to be changed, that has personally made me a better hunter because I'm not focusing on these outside aspects of hunting maybe private ground and having to worry about other people. because it's just me hunting this property. And hunting private, you have a general good idea on what's going to happen. I'm not saying what the deer are going to do, but you know what spot you're going to, you know what time you're going to be there, you know what time you need to be there. If you hunt it enough, you know where the deer are moving through, you know that nothing else has been in there and other people have been in there that have messed up your hunting. Personally, I've learned a lot just by sitting and watching these deer go by. I passed on a handful of bucks this year. I've had some close encounters with some good deer this year, and I actually ended up shooting one on this property. I shot him really high, never found him, but it was a huge learning experience, and that deer did show back up on camera, but he's not being pressured by others. He's not having this extra layer of pressure, not only by me, but on public ground, it's my pressure along with anybody else who wants to go in there and hunt. I know that it's a mistake that I made, and I can learn from that. We've talked about the private for a little bit now. Now let's jump into the public side of things, which is honestly what I have more experience with, is hunting public ground. Like I said earlier, I have only been bow hunting for roughly 3 years now, and I have only went out and bow hunted. So I am learning. This is a learning process for me. Yes, have I had encounters on public land? Absolutely. Have I passed on deer that I probably shouldn't have passed on? Absolutely. But I just want to put that out there that I'm no expert at hunting, especially bow hunting, but I do have a lot more experience on public land than I do hunting permission or private ground. I know I've said it a couple times now, but like biggest thing with hunting public ground, it's public land. There's gonna be other people on it. Sometimes even if you find these spots that it doesn't look like anybody's been there, there's a good chance that if you hunted enough and you're there multiple times throughout the week or multiple weekends throughout the year, somebody else is gonna be in there hunting while you're there. Now, if both of you are very timely and wake up on time and get there at the correct time, depending on how far you have to walk in or whatever, many times I have met somebody in the parking lot and said, hey, where are you going? I'm going over here. Sounds good, I'm going over here. That way nobody is crossing paths with each other. Also with that though, me and one person might meet in the parking lot, say we're going in opposite directions, and we do go in opposite directions, but 2 hours after daylight, somebody else has pulled in and is just walking the timber. That could potentially ruin a hunt if somebody's walking right through where you expected the deer to be. Maybe they pop out and where you thought the deer were bedded at, maybe they jump deer, and your hunt could change drastically based off of that one person walking in. I was never irritated that people were on the public land that I was hunting. It was more of the fact that I have worked hard and I got up early, I got into my tree early, and Joe Blow decides to walk in an hour and a half after sunrise and just walk super loudly through the woods. Most people who are hunting know that you need to get out there early and be settled in before shooting light opens up. Or maybe it's the last hour of shooting light and somebody gets out of their tree and starts walking out. It's those little things of being around people. It's not necessarily there being people on the public land that's irritating unless there's just a ton of people. It's whenever they don't think about others. Me personally, when I was hunting public more, if I pulled up to a piece of public, let's say it's 200 acres, which is a good size for a lot of the pieces that are around me. If there was one car there, I was extremely hesitant on pulling in. Most of the time, I did not even go there. They beat me to it. I lost. I'm leaving. I'm not going to go in and risk screwing their hunt up. But there's times that I'm the first person there. Not that I expect others not to show up, but if I'm hunting 200 acres and I'm the first one there, somebody else pulls in, okay, 2 people here, not a huge deal. Somebody else pulls in, especially if it's during rifle season, that can be pretty dangerous. There's been times where I've gotten out super early to get to my spot. Nobody came walking in underneath me after the sun came up or anything like that, but when I left, there was 10 cars in the parking lot of a 200 acre piece. That can get pretty squirrely and honestly pretty damn sketchy, especially if it's during rifle season and people are going to be shooting guns in every which way direction. At that point, you don't even know where anybody's at. All right, I'm done with my little rant about people being stupid on public land. My second thing about public land, which is, a good thing, is everybody has access to it. No matter what stage of hunting you're in, no matter where your financial situation is, you can go hunt public land as long as you follow the rules and regulations of your state, but also the rules and regulations of that specific piece of public ground. And besides like your tax dollars, obviously, it doesn't cost you anything to go step foot on that public land. Now, there are some spots that are considered public. They might be walk-in. They might have a fee for you to park your vehicle and that's because they might be private land that's open to the public for people to hunt. But I personally don't have any public ground around me. I don't think Missouri has any in general, unless it's a management zone, but even then you still have to pay for it. You just have to draw for it, where you have to pay to go hunt on pieces of conservation ground or forest ground or whatever. So if you're wanting to hunt on a budget and you don't feel like going and knocking on doors and trying to get some private permission, you can hunt in Missouri, and you can hunt a lot of acres. And that goes into my third point. This piece of permission and the other piece of permission together, I have roughly 200 acres in total of ground that I can hunt that's private. Now, I'm not well versed on other states, but in Missouri, with the forest ground and the conservation ground and the management zones that you can go hunt, there are millions of acres that you can go hunt for free. Having access to all that ground is freaking awesome. 200 acres of private versus 500,000 acres of public. There are big deer in there. They might be harder to find, but you've got a lot more ground to work with. If one spot doesn't work, you can go over to the next spot. If that spot doesn't work, you can go back over to another spot. You have plenty of options when it comes to hunting public ground. To say that there is nowhere to hunt is just not true, and this is just my experience with Missouri, but I feel like it can be everywhere else. There's public ground everywhere, and I know some states don't have near as much, but the states that do, you have options, but you can still try to find deer in different parts of your state, or maybe different parts of your county that you haven't hunted before. New ground is new ground. Kind of touching back in with the money side of things, I guess it's kind of a pro and con, but we talked about, like, you don't have to pay anything to hunt public ground. You buy your gear, and obviously when you make purchases of outdoor gear, some of that money does go to conservation, and your tax dollars do pay for some of the amenities we get with public ground, but you can't change the habitat. I don't know how it works in other states, but in Missouri, if you're hunting public land, like, you can't even trim branches. You can hold them back, but you can't cut branches down up in a tree. You can't do anything with the land. You can't do anything except go in there and hunt. And that can be a big deal, especially if you're somebody who actually wants to become a better hunter and you want your management practices to go up. If you're hunting public, that you can't make a change that you feel will be beneficial legally, then that change might not happen. Even if you propose that change and a lot of people approve of that change to your conservation department, it could take years before they actually go in there and do that and make that adjustment. Like I said, public land is fun. Like, me and my buddy, we hunted quite a bit of public this past year before I had gained permission on this piece of private. It can be a blast, but it's also hard work because you do have a lot of factors that are working against you when you're going on a hunting. Whether that be, the age of deer, just being younger in general because people are shooting more deer, or even just running into people in general. If everybody had the same management practices of, shooting mature deer, letting the deer grow, letting them get bigger, you still have the factor of you're dealing with other people while you're hunting. And your spot that you're hunting could have somebody else hunting in it, and you can't do anything about it. So my, closing thoughts on everything, they're both hard work. I didn't necessarily work super hard as far as the actual land itself, getting access to these permission properties this year, but I spent a lot of hours driving around, knocking on doors, talking with people, trying to convince them to let me hunt and convince them that I'm not somebody who's just crazy out here going to be doing illegal stuff or anything like that. And on the public side of things, it's a lot of hard work just to go out and hunt. Like, might not have public close to you. I know the pieces of public that I used to hunt around the house, they were 30, 45-minute drives. The ones that were close and the ones that were actually decent were over an hour drive. And overall, you're working really hard to just get up into a tree with dealing with everybody, walking in, trying to gain access only from the public side of things. Now, is one easier than the other? For me to say one is easier than the other, it would be like comparing apples to oranges. They're so different. You have, like this year, I have to work really hard before season to make my hunting decent on this piece of private. And it could take years to make it where you want it to be. It's a lot of work and a lot of money, and it's hard work to achieve those goals. On the public side of things, you don't have to do that. I mean, you really can't do that, but you're not spending this money and this time going in and making these changes and having to improve habitat or whatever. Even though it might need it, you can't do it. But the hard work actually comes in at a different point in the whole hunting process. No matter if you're on private or public, none of them were a walk in the park. You could have a piece of private that is set up just perfectly for you, and you get in there clean, whatever. You still have to understand what these animals are doing and understand that they still are wild animals. Same way with public. You can get in there completely clean, not anybody else being in there. Everything could line up perfectly, and something still gets screwed up. The whole point of this video was to try to get an opinion on something that I am fairly new at, especially on private land. This is a new experience for me, and I've formed a lot of opinions over it, but in my head I'm not saying, oh, this was super easy. This was way easier than hunting public ground. This was way harder than hunting public land. None of that is running through my head, and none of that ran through my head on public besides running into people. So you can make it work no matter what. That's kind of my pros and cons. I know I was kind of jumping all over the place. Hopefully that kind of clears some things up, especially people getting into hunting. Like, it can be very confusing. No, you don't have to hunt private land to kill big bucks. No, you don't have to hunt public land to be cool. There's many things that go into this, and I could talk for an hour explaining every single little nitpicky thing about it, but I'm not going to, because I just want to try to cover the general basis of things with somebody who's not been doing it very long, and I haven't been able to form a, I guess like a corporate opinion on it. Like, I don't have a lot of years doing either or. So my opinion is based off of like honest and personal experience. Couple of things to take home with you. Public land is not bad. You can make it work. Private land is not easy to access, but you can also work hard at it, and if you knock on enough doors, somebody is going to give you permission to hunt eventually. Multiple times, and I know everybody else does this, you're driving around, you see a deer, or you see a piece of property that looks really good, pull out Onyx or HuntWise or whatever you're using, drop a pin, go talk to that person whenever you have time. Knock on their door, see if they will allow you to hunt. If it's a no, it's a no. You weren't hunting it anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. There's things you can do to make both of them really good, and I think that's the biggest thing is people complain about one or the other. One person having one person having the other, and I think anybody can make it good no matter what your situation is. They're both going to take hard work. Some of that comes more before season for one, some comes more during season for the other. No matter what, you have to work hard at it, and not one person is just lazy if they're putting the work in to try to kill a deer. Anyway, I'm done rambling. I appreciate you guys, and y'all have a good one.